Alrighty. Hi, I'm Chris from Airwindows, and as usual, I have a plugin this week. Also, kind of a progress report on how things are going. I have also got a pretty much entirely full dumpster in my driveway because I need to clear out my basement, perhaps in preparation for when I reach a particular Patreon goal and start getting to work providing people with hardware parts for doing tinkering type stuff. And this is a troublesome thing because it turns out I have to do a lot of work to get that kind of thing together, but you don't really get to see any of it. I feel that when I start actually putting circuitry together and making live streams of doing like soldering and talking and showing people how you make 39-cent chips into things like sequencers and oscillators, then people will start becoming more excited about that. But for the time being, there's not much to see, and I just have to do a lot of prep work. However, I also have got, let's see here, PaulDither. That is my plugin. I've got some fancier stuff coming pretty soon, but PaulDither is the plugin for this week. And it's like a lot of the other things I've done recently. If people are not interested in dither, thanks, bye, see you next week. But this is a form of TPDF. And it's named PaulDither because the idea was espoused by Paul Frindle, who's a very good person, smart guy, was using it on Sony Oxford stuff, if I'm not mistaken. And here's kind of what you get. You turn it on, you get dithered audio. And what we've got there is the revisions of these dithers have an option for 16 or HD, at 16 or 24-bit, and the dres control at 0 is the correct amount of dither for that thing. Whether it be 24-bit or 16-bit, dither is what you do when you're reducing 32-bit core audio or whatever bus on the digital audio workstation to some form of output that will use fixed length. Like we're talking make a file, make a CD, send it to a converter that takes in 24-bit word length. All these things are relevant purposes for using dither on. And what we can do to demonstrate that is I have this up against regulation TPDF dither. And when I say regulation TPDF dither, what I mean is not exactly, because what regulation TPDF dither does is it combines two 1-bit sized random sources. And what mine does is it adds one and subtracts one, meaning that the average amount of energy is still going to be a very tiny offset, meaning that the dither quality ends up covering 3 values instead of only 2. So basically my TPDF dither sounds better than other people's TPDF dither, but has a half bit of DC offset. Ooh. That is accidental, but it contributes to it sounding better at the bottom of the noise floor. I don't think PaulDither does exactly. I actually kind of think of it, maybe it has the same quality, in which case Paul would not approve of it, but it is still my variation on this concept. And what PaulDither does as a dither, it is a TPDF. It generates one random source, adds it, and then remembers what that was. In the next sample, it subtracts it again, meaning it is a high-passed dither. It's also more efficient because it doesn't have to run as many random sources as full-on to random number TPDF dither. And what that sounds like, I can play music again, is this is regular TPDF, and this is PaulDither. See, what that sounds like is it's brighter and it's also less loud, but it's just as good. See, this is a triangular probability density function, which is what TPDF stands for. And so is this. The reason that works is because you can use the same random number twice in a row, adding it the first time, subtracting it the second time. It will equate to being equally random, but if you take something and then immediately subtract it again, you don't get base. Like, I can exaggerate that. Let's do something fun with this, as long as we're fooling around with this stuff. Let's pretend that we're listening from a distance. We're some distance away. We'll use my average. My regular average has some funny behaviors, but it is going to show what the loudness of... Come to think of it, I could also do something else. Let's do something other than average. Let's take average back out, and I don't know, we'll go with avermatrix. Avermatrix is also average, but it gets to run multiple polls of it. And the reason I'm doing this is because highpass dither is going to generate a brighter noise. And if you were listening through some kind of filtering or listening at a distance with air smoothing out the high frequencies a little bit, or anything like that, you know, then the PaulDither, the highpass dither, is going to wind up seeming a lot quieter than regular TPDF. And I'll demonstrate that like this. So we've got a much darkened sound. Now if we turn on TPDF, that's what the noise floor sounds like. But the highpass dither sounds a lot quieter. And we can exaggerate it like this. Crank it all the way up, for instance. And that's got a certain amount of loudness to it, but the highpass has a kind of brighter, whiter, and less noisy in the low frequency sound to it. While still being a fully functioning TPDF dither. And there's one side effect to this, which is that since it is a fully functioning TPDF dither, the fact that dres is here, I'm incorporating that in a number of my older dither plugins so that they all have the switch between 16 and 24-bit, which is the important part, and they have the dres for those, I don't know, such as dark, the dither me timbers, and studio tan and stuff like that also relates to this purpose. The ones that do something weird in the quantizing will become more obvious, but if you have a regular TPDF dither, there will be no change in the tone, so you effectively can't actually do bit crushing with these. Instead, what you're going to get is kind of like bit crushing, but all it really is a rising noise floor, and that's all you ever hear. And I'll demonstrate that like this. That's the music, that's the audio that we're getting. And then, as we start rising the noise, the sound is not affected. And in fact, we can go down to the depths of the noise floor, and here's something that's relevant to digital audio noise floors. You can still hear that music. It might not be fantastic. I've got stuff like dark is neat in its way, and not just another dither works well in its way, but I've got stuff that gives you a better picture of the audio down buried below the noise floor here. But with proper TPDF dither, either kind, like this kind too, you start sneaking the bit depth up so that the audio is just buried beneath truncation and way down in the noise floor. And the thing about a noise floor is you can still hear into it. People don't normally get that. People are like, well, there's the noise floor, nothing else matters. But you can indeed hear to it. So this is regular TPDF. This is us kind of sort of being able to hear what it sounds like. I'm holding down options so that I can more finely adjust this. And the deal with why you might want to use PaulDither if you want to use a regular TPDF is like this. This is the same setting. A little more obvious, you can hear more of that music under there. And that's not because it's being dithered better, it's being dithered exactly the same amount. It's just that the noise level is lower with this. Whereas you can still hear it at pretty much exactly the same level. Everything else is about the same. But the noise level is not as extreme. So there you have it. That is PaulDither, and it is being released as the latest in a series that will inevitably end, although I think I might actually have a new invention of a dither. Not necessarily as good as dark, but a new invention of a dither that sort of bridges the gap between these regulation normal TPDF dithers and the weird word length reducers that I come up with. So there's going to be some more of these, but it's not an infinite sequence, and I'm about to get ready to do a couple of plugins that aren't dithers at all and should be a lot more interesting to people as far as tone shaping and stuff is concerned, but that's for another day. And for now, I am remembering some of my things, like that if I need to read anything, I need to be wearing these glasses because I'm old and my eyes ain't what they used to be. And I will also remember to mention Patreon. I did say that I had a whole buttload of work to do. Like, essentially, I'm clearing out my basement and getting rid of basically trash. Not musical trash either, because I can't be throwing away electronics. Not only because why would I ever want to throw away electronics, but also because you can't throw away stuff with, like, lead and heavy metals and stuff in it, so I can only throw away just junk that's been sitting in my basement forever. But I need to make space for potentially ramping up and letting people build electronic gear. I was just watching a really cool, if you ever heard of this, there's a movie that came out called I Dream of Wires. And I really like it. It came out, it's available on Blu-ray. I got a sort of extended Ultra edition and discovered that my Blu-ray player plugged into the Mac doesn't actually work very well, and I'm going to need another one of those. But I watched the nearly 4-hour version of this movie, and it's all about modular synthesis, which, as you can see, I'm very interested in. And the later section is about people building their own stuff. And that is interesting, let's just say. The fact that people can make these little cottage industries making Eurorack stuff, and I'm not likely to be that because I'm this weird, neither fish nor fowl kind of thing. There was a guy in the video that was talking about like, oh, I am a musician, and I'm a musician except for I started building these Eurorack modules, and it turns out I'm kind of a crappy musician, and I'm better at building the hardware, so I do that now. And it's like, I'm not sure if I relate with that super well because I'm all manner of things, and even when I do music, I'm trying to invent a genre, and I've been doing that. I've been including visual processing and coming up with how I would do that. I do question and answer sessions on Monday, so both about plugins and anything else that I touch, show up and ask. It's 11 o'clock Eastern Standard Time, AM. And the thing about it, it's like people got into doing this stuff and they're going like, oh, here's how I build this thing, and this is how I etch circuit boards. Oh, interesting. How much does it cost to get the parts to etch circuit boards? There's your panels. How much did it cost to get that drill press to do your panels? How much did it cost to this and that and the other thing? Oh, there's somebody with a fab. So they're like, I can make my modules, and they're using a giant robot to place like surface mount parts and have that thing get assembled. How much did it cost to do that? Really? Seriously? That seems approachable to you? So my take on this continues to be, and I'm not sure how recently I've talked about this, but it is a plan going forwards. If my Patreon gets to $2,000 a month, anything over and above that starts getting turned into buying electronic parts and then reselling them at cost to people who would like to experiment with hardware. Because I like hardware. I like building analog stuff out of chips and parts and wires and things. And I have seen fit to try to design a new way to do this, where you could get parts into people's hands. They'd have to get their own soldering iron and solder and stuff, but that's not the most expensive thing you could run into. And then it's all about how can you get people building something that they can actually use for absolutely dirt cheap. I'm reading another book, and not that I dream of wires with a book. I'm reading a book that I read about in Bill Bruford's autobiography. He mentioned that he was inspired when very young by a book called 4 Lives in the Bebop Business, and so I got a copy of this book. I'm reading it. I'm in the middle of the one on Cecil Taylor, and it's amazing. Thank you, Bill, for tipping me off to that. And one of the things that strikes me is Cecil Taylor is talking about how he is inventing this sort of like atonal meets modern classical meets jazz kind of thing. I got to listen to some of his music because it sounds like it's right up my alley. And he is a piano player, a pianist who doesn't own a piano. Because he's a black jazz musician from like, the 40s and 50s and 60s and stuff, trying to earn a living as a jazz musician. It's like, yeah, you don't earn enough money to buy a house and to put a grand piano in it doing that. And he's teaching a drummer who is like his idea of the great free jazz drummer, a great guy who can play in non-tempo, who can make drum sounds. And this is probably one of the things that inspired Bill Bruford as he was talking about it. A guy who was learning how to be able to use the drum kit to provide accompaniment for a piano on a non-tempo position. Never mind being able to do correct swing or whatever. It's like, can you do correct drum improvisation in a world where there is no repeating pulse, what do you do? And he's got this guy who is learning how to do that, and he said, and this guy doesn't own his own drum set either. And yet, that's why I'm doing what I do. That's why, it's not why I'm doing the Patreon, because I've been doing this before I was doing the Patreon, but it's part of the reason, because when I did the Patreon, it was so that I could put out all of my plugins for free, open source, and have it be just Patreon supported. Because there are people out there just like that. You know, including today, especially today. There are people out there who are capable of coming up with brilliant, cool, interesting musical thoughts and making stuff, who can't do it because they don't own their instruments. They're a piano player, they don't own a piano. They are a drummer, they don't own a drum kit. And I like synthesizers and modular stuff, and that's a stupidly expensive hobby to be into. I mean, it's like, essentially I come from privilege, although I've had a really weird life. And for that reason, I ended up able to get into synthesizers and stuff. And also, I'm kind of old. I'm over 50. I've had time to build up a lot of these things. Buy a little bits of stuff here and there, and eventually you have a big pile of synthesizers. And, you know, it takes years, but my point is, it's important to get stuff together where there is a path to get parts into the hands of people who can use them. And that is one of my Patreon goals. I think I've got it on the thing right now where it says, if I get over $2,000 a month, I start doing this in a serious way. And that's because it's a goal, and also because it takes me a while to get up to this, and it costs something to develop, like get the piles of parts together so that you can start distributing it to people. And it all depends. Like, maybe nobody will care. Maybe nobody's interested. I suspect that people will be interested once I start doing it and showing how it's done. And that is also coming. Basically, in order to do that, I have to have cameras and things for the YouTube experience to be better, so that I can hit a button and go from this image to a nice close-up on the circuit board that I'm wiring together, or not even circuit board, the perf board that I'm able to get for really cheap, and how you put parts onto it and assemble it into something that's usable and works. And I've been figuring this stuff out. So I feel like when that time comes, which is not going to be overnight, maybe it's going to be 2021, I don't know when. It'll get there eventually. But I feel like when I get there, I will be ready. And then the world of Airwindows, YouTube, and watching me do stuff on stream is going to get a little bit more interesting still. And the world of me doing music jams and stuff is also likely to get funkier. It's probably going to get a little bit more like Forbidden Planet. Like, rather than just being space house music, there's also going to be some weird, atonal, really crazy sounding electronic stuff that sounds like mad scientist glare. But hey, I think that's what you guys like some of the time anyway. So, all in all, a lot is going on. I don't want to take forever talking about it. In fact, I have been... I don't want to take forever talking about it. And I've gone quite some time talking about it. But hey, all I had to show you as far as plugins this time was PaulDither. And I can explain what that's about, but that's just another dither that people can have. It's another free plugin. Last I heard about the VCV Rack Airwindows thing, the fellow who was porting some of that stuff to VCV Rack that I haven't played with, that's another thing that I need to get around to. I think he is convinced to stick with the original monitoring stuff. I think I was mentioning that a bunch of my plugins are now available in VCV Rack, and somebody was asking for monitoring to be readjusted so that bass didn't distort when you slammed it with really loud bass. And it's like, no, it's to tell you that your bass is too loud if you're doing that. And the desired result out of monitoring is to have audio that is going to work in a number of, it's like unmastered audio, if you want to call it that, in that you don't get to slam bass through it. You don't get to slam levels through monitoring. It will tell you that you're doing something wrong if you do that. And also, the output of stuff that works for monitoring will work better on venues like Spotify and YouTube, Apple Music, whatever. All that stuff that will turn you down if you're too loud. So there are many useful things about that. And oh, check it out. I have a bouncy couch. It's a bouncy camera. All these things are things that I got to work on day in, day out. And I can but try. So I'll see some of you guys on Monday when I do another question and answer session. Between now and then, I might fool with, here is the thing that I was working on. I have been working on the visual quality, so now I have this Blackmagic camera that I strongly recommend people get into. If you're into the thing where you like using the ATEM Mini to do switching between stuff, you should be jumping on these Blackmagic Pocket Cinema cameras because you can control them from the switcher and from the computer, and that's extremely awesome. But for the same reason, I've been adjusting that, and I also am learning how to do the lookup table that I'm fiddling with now. That's the airwindows film lookup table. I'm not sure if I put it out or anything, but even if I didn't, this is the film lookup table that works for the Panasonic GH5. And I'm no longer using one of those, so I need to update that as well. So yeah, and the reason, and what I would do to update that is I basically need to take a because some of this is using a lookup table, and some of this is adjusting the Blackmagic ATEM MIDI control thingy, the ATEM software control, and use the controls that, here, I can even show you. But it's about learning how to control this thing. And if people are interested, I can talk about that on Monday as well, if you're curious. Learning how to fiddle with stuff like, here's how you make the brightness incredibly wrong, or put it back again. And lift and gamma and gain, and what these things do and how they work. So basically, my journey of getting to be a better and more effective YouTuber and using all this technology is also your journey, because you can experience any of it that I'm experiencing. And with a bit of luck, if I learn how to do it really well, I can also teach you. And then lots of people will know how to do this kind of stuff. And that's also why I'm so passionate about doing the getting CMOS chips and parts into people's hands in such a way that they can build synthesizers that are really a lot more affordable than these things normally are. Because I feel like I can invent the way to make it so that you can have that, and it doesn't cost thousands upon thousands of dollars, which is what the full video rig does. But I should be able to get you the ability to build synthesizers and sequencers and things for way, way, way less than that. And then if you find success doing that, you can afford the cameras and things to do the proper YouTube stuff, and I'll be happy to tell you how to do that too. But it's all a work in progress. And on that note, yeah, I have the Patreon. I'll link to it. I feel pretty confident that if that does better, I'll be able to deliver upon more stuff. As you can see, I'm already delivering on stuff by having it expand outwards as it goes. And I hope you like PaulDither. I know it's not exciting. It's another one of those dithers that I put out, but I feel it's relevant to have these in a convenient form where you can find the one that you like, and it can just sit there. You could use it for the DRes if you wanted, so you can hear what that sounds like, but you can also switch it between 16 and 24-bit, make CDs if you still need to do those, any of that kind of stuff. And it's just a maintenance thing, like putting out new versions of oh, I wasn't supposed to say that. I'll see you guys next week. And we will have more plugins to come. But for now, I'll talk to you later. Bye-bye.